Good evening, Facebook family. Welcome to another episode of Marriage Mondays with Nick and Trina and Brent, and also the lady and the coach. And we just want to thank y'all for coming in tonight and helping us get out the word to help marriages and relationships to just be better with some information. Because new information can bring about new change in your relationship, and with that new information can cause your relationship to get better. So that's what we're here to do, is just give you new information. As we get revelation about the information we give it to you. So that's what we do.
So we do represent Crown Kingdom Cultural Center. And we just want to make that clear. This is Founders Week. We are celebrating our founders, Bishop Finance Bush Jr. and Denise Bush. We are very grateful for the work that they have done and the sacrifice that they have given, their whole family has given, honestly, for them to be able to allow God to use them to produce Crown Kingdom Cultural Center, which is the platform on which we stand today to come before you. So we are so grateful to them, and we celebrate them. And we just encourage you all to reach out and to give words of encouragement, financial gifts, just to make sure that they feel appreciated during this week. And we'll put in the comments Cash App to Bishop Bush if you want to be a blessing to him. I know that would, the money ain't everything, but it certainly does help to convey that appreciation. So we certainly encourage that. So if I think I saw Renisha or somebody else who knows can put in the comments the $ Finance Bush Jr. That's the Cash App that will go directly to Bishop Bush. So we certainly encourage you all to give some form of expression just to show some appreciation to them for the work they've done. And we would not be here before you today on this platform without the ministry that he and Lady Denise Bush have put into place. So we don't want to overlook that or gloss over it. We want to highlight it, in fact, and make sure that you all are very much aware that this is Founders Week, and we are reaching out to them, showing our appreciation this week, because we do so appreciate them both.
Right.
And their family, because it can be being a first family is quite a member of a first family is a calling as well. There's sacrifice that the whole family puts forth, and I can say that firsthand. And so, yeah, just want to not gloss over that and make sure to highlight that. So I see we have more folks coming in. Y'all coming in quick today.
Yeah, they're coming in tonight.
Got Sister Rhonda Johnson, Myra Christian. I saw some Evergreen folks come on at first, but those names have gone by. There's Sheena. That's my typist. Josephine Green. Sister Josephine is watching. We have Latasha Holly Evans was the first one on tonight, representing Evergreen Church in Bristol, Georgia. We appreciate you all. Sister Jennifer Bush is here. Let's see. Yep. All right. Y'all be sure to comment, interact with us tonight. Just let us know you're listening and that you're interested in the content. Give us some feedback as we go. It just makes the conversation more interesting. So, and even people that watch it in replay, we encourage you to put comments in, just so that everybody gets a chance to participate and people can see what others are thinking. You never know how what you say can be a blessing to others as well. So while you got it all shared, you've already shared it.
Yep.
All right. Can you post it on my page too?
What's that coming off your
asking
page?
Too much? No, it's coming off the church page.
All right.
But it's okay.
I'll share it to your page.
Yeah, to my personal page. Share to page. There we go. Oh, you don't have it. Don't worry about it. I'll do it afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. You want to tell us what our topic is? I put it in the, I typed it all in pretty good this time, but let's talk about it.
All right. Our topic tonight is we're going to talk about conversation killers. Things when you start having a conversation or getting into a discussion with your spouse, things that can actually stop the conversation and cause a disruption in communication.
Yeah.
So one of the points we're going to talk about under conversation killers, what are they? How do they affect your relationship? And that's what we're going to talk about. The first one we're going to talk about is criticism, fault finding, blaming the other person. Now, when that happens, what does that cause you? If I blame you for something or find fault in what you're doing,
well, I don't even really hear what you started talking about. What I'm focused on is the fact that you're blaming me, especially if I don't feel like I am the person to blame.
Right.
So it would shift my attention from the issue at hand to the fact that you're blaming me, which feels personal.
It's a personal attack. And then, like she said, you shift that conversation to something like, oh, now you're finding fault with me. Now it ain't about what we're discussing. Now you got an issue with me. And I'm finna do what? Defend myself.
And it also, it breaks you up as a team. Because now you're pointing the finger at me as if I'm the enemy instead of the fact that we're on the same team. So whatever we're having to deal with, the issue is not who is to blame. It doesn't matter because we're on the same team.
Right.
So whatever the problem is, we have to figure out how to face it together.
Absolutely. And because when you're doing it in a way that causes the other person to feel a certain way, or cause that person to feel just a little bit off and don't think that you're actually caring about them, you get into a situation where now I have to defend myself. And when you defend yourself, there's another point we're going to talk about, is you get into defensiveness. And that's another level of actually shutting down when we're talking about defensiveness.
Well, another reason. I don't know about level, but certainly a reason. Can we go in order, though, because I typed them in order.
Okay.
So that's criticism, and that certainly is a big problem.
Right.
And I will say, too, that often people who are critical of others are usually critical of themselves. And so if you're a person that's critical of yourself, you might more readily admit to the fact that you're critical of yourself. But the flip side of that is very often if you're critical of yourself, you're probably critical of other people too. And so it's important to recognize that behavior in yourself, which is why it's always so important for you to be aware that you have to work on yourself. It's easy sometimes to see what another person is doing and how you can critique what they're doing or make recommendations for them to make improvements. But in all honesty, a lot of times what you see in the other person is really what you is a reflection of what you bring to the table. So if I can look at you and say, you too critical of me, you criticizing me all the time, chances are it's a reflection of what I'm sowing into you as well. That's very often in marriage, you kind of get that mirror effect. The problems you see in your spouse very often can be a reflection of what you bring to the table as well, because the two are one. And so sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow, but the truth of it is you do have to look at yourself. You can never only look at your partner's part of it, because you're a part of whatever is going on in that relationship. There's some part that you play as well. And so, yeah, if you find your spouse is critical, check yourself first and see if you, in fact, are critical of your spouse as well. And you may be getting that back because that's what you sown. Because you reap what you sow.
Every time. That is a principle. All right. The second one we're going to talk about is on the list that was typed into the broadcast is contempt. Contempt. What is contempt? Is a lack of respect for your partner's thoughts, a lack of respect for. It's almost like looking down on your partner, on your spouse, and what they say doesn't have any relevance. You live on this platform like I'm above you, and nothing that you say can add to anything that I want to do. So you stand, if you stay in a state of contentment towards your partner.
Contentment or
not
contempt?
Contentment. She's looking at me like that's not a word,
it's
y'all.
Not.
Okay.
It's okay.
I apologize. I'll take that one back out the air. If you're looking at your partner in contempt, then you have the ability just to be looking down on them and don't share in their thoughts, and their thoughts don't matter to you. So
yeah, I think when I think of the word contempt, because I was kind of trying to process it, if you're in court and the judge holds you in contempt of court,
right,
it basically means that you're being disrespectful to the authority of the court.
right,
And I think that applies in marriage as well. And I think very often, particularly with women, sometimes we can be dishonoring to our husbands, which is a form of, which can come off as contempt, but it's basically being dishonoring or disrespectful. Sometimes it's in your attitudes and actions. It may not be in your words. It can be more about the sort of the position of your heart, as in you feeling like, you don't know what he's talking about, or that was such a dumb answer or whatever. You can have those thoughts, but those are in contempt. And, God requires us to give honor to our husbands. And so if you're married to somebody that you can't respect, or somebody you can't honor or hold in high esteem, then that may be a problem. You're going to have to make an adjustment with your thinking about your spouse and the position of your heart towards your spouse. So for those that are not married, I certainly would encourage you to make sure that you choose particularly a woman choosing a man whom you feel you can admire and someone that you honor, someone whose opinions you respect. Doesn't mean that everything they do is, that you'll be in agreement. That'll never happen. That'll never happen. But you need to be able to have a respectful conversation with your spouse to express that difference of opinion in a way that still that does not tear him down, or that does not dishonor him. And the same is true towards a
woman. Yeah.
That's right, because some men can be very contemptuous. I think that's the word you were looking for.
Maybe.
We grow here. So it can express contempt towards their wives and look down on them. Sometimes just because they're a female. And so we have to be cognizant of that, as husbands and as wives, that we honor one another, that we give each other honor.
Right.
And love. And contempt doesn't match up with either honor nor love. Mm-mm. So we want to avoid contempt. And by way of communication, that's definitely a shutdown. Because if you're talking to me like, in a way as if I'm dumb, or as if what I have to say is being belittled, you're not going to get a good response. And the communication will be broken down.
It will be. It absolutely does. Mm-hmm. All right. So, the next point will be defensiveness.
That's the next communication killer, or what you call them, Conversation
killers.
Okay.
Communication killers. All those kind of mean the same thing, because if you're not talking, you're not communicating, other than with your nonverbal communication. And that's not saying something is really not good sometimes. It's good to say things with your words. And keeping that level of open communication going, avoid these things we're talking about tonight, as much as you possibly can. You may go through them to learn from them, but learn from them and go through them.
And correct yourself.
Yeah. So we're going to get into defensiveness. You are basically responsible for how you impact your spouse. And I say that to you need to be the one to make sure that you're not causing them to go into a defensive mode. Because like the first point we talked about with contempt, criticism. When you criticize your partner, they may have the reaction to go into defensive mode, because now you're not protecting my heart, so now I am. I'm going to have to protect me and how I feel.
Right.
So when that happens, you need to find a way to come out of that, so y'all can keep an open line of communication. So defensiveness can really does shut it down.
Well, and you don't have to defend yourself from your allies. You defend yourself against enemies or opposition. And so if you find that the two of you are in a state of opposition against one another, that's cause to stop and pause and to regroup. regroup. Somebody's got to bring us back to reality. Listen, we are not fighting against one another. We're on the same team here. We are not enemies. We are allies. And we can resolve this issue without the need to be defensive. And so we do want to be mindful that we're not taking a position of offense or offending our spouse, which can naturally put them in a position of defensiveness. That definitely breaks down the conversation or the communication. And you talked about communication being silent. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
When that communication is silent, because what happens is either of you in that silence can interpret the other person's actions. You're interpreting it only from your perspective. You don't have the benefit of knowing and understanding where your spouse is coming from, what your spouse is thinking. You can only assume why your spouse is behaving the way they're behaving. You can only assume what they're thinking about whatever's going on, and that's dangerous. That's a dangerous position to be in. You're not enemies.
Right. Always play for the same team.
Right.
Always. And that's just a sports analogy, and we got a couple that we talk to on a regular basis. They call themselves Team Overflow. Charles and Francine Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've talked to Brother Brown, and they, what he's told me that what they do is everything
He's
that
watching.
yeah, Brother Brown's on that. What they do is they always come back to a place of oneness. Even though what they've been going through and how it all comes out, because they're an older couple that's been married before and now they got together and found this new way to do things. And they always find a way to come back together and not let stuff linger. You cannot let stuff linger when you're on a team with each other. Because in the coaching world, if you let problems persist, it'll eat you from, it'll break down what you got going on from the inside out. And you want all the stuff that you're fighting against to be on the outside of the team. So that's why it's good, and I'm just going to use this word because we've used it several times. You got to set up boundaries in your relationship, what you're going to let in. And, also you need to set up boundaries of what you're gonna let out, because you need as much of togetherness as you can, unity, that to produce a good relationship. So I just wanted to bring about that point while we're talking about defensiveness.
Yeah, and it is important to establish those boundaries, but not at time of disagreement. It's best to establish those boundaries in times of peace. And so that's why we talk about taking time to plan. You want to have some boundaries for fighting fair and for addressing problems before those problems arise.
Right.
I thought I heard something. And so it's hard to be neutral and to be completely trusting of what your spouse is bringing to the table when we're talking about ways of compromise and bringing about peace. It's hard to, if you're having a current conflict on the table, that's not the time to try to figure out what's fair or what strategies we're going to use.
That should have already been in place.
You got to always already have it in place. And if you're having an issue, it's best to pull away and you all start to come up with some strategies that are going to work for your family. And what works for your family might not look like what works for our family or what works for another family.
Right.
Some people firmly believe, you don't go to bed mad. You stay up and you work it out that night while you're mad. That's not a good strategy for me, because I'm going to need some downtime. You need time to think about it, pray about it. And sometimes when we wake up the next day, you wake up with a whole new attitude, more clarity about the situation. And sometimes we might even table stuff and meet a couple days later.
Yeah.
But we had to get to a place of maturity to where whatever that urgent situation is that had us upset, that can't we can't afford to be upset until the time we can get together to settle it.
Right.
We have to be mature enough to go on with our lives, even with the issue up in the air, and be able to come back to it level-headed and to come up with a solution. But just because I'm upset with you because we're in disagreement about what days to clean the bathroom, that's not going to ruin my interactions with you for the next day.
No.
We have to be able to table it, agree to table it, and to come back to it. And that's what works for us. But
that's a skill, like she said. Now that's a skill we had to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
We had to do that because we've stayed up our shared nights, not trying to get it.
We have not
done.
talked to each other for days at a time.
That's right. We
to be honest about it.
Trying to find a way to get through it. And the more we don't talk, the more we talk to ourselves.
Yeah, and the worse it gets.
And the worse it gets.
And then when we do talk, it's worse. It wasn't coming up with anything productive. But once we learn to write down whatever that issue is, set a date to come together, even if we had to do it by text. We're in the same house and send you a calendar invite. Are you available to meet Thursday at 7 o'clock for us to, have some conflict resolution?
Right.
And then we just table it until then, and then we just move on with the rest of our lives without holding animosity or holding bad feelings about whatever that one issue is. You just got to put it aside, go on. Still give kisses at the end of the night or when you come home or whatever. You just got to go on.
Leave in the morning.
It's a level of maturity.
Right.
A level of maturity to grow to. So that's what works for us. But I know people that will not go to bed with anything unsettled. And so that's the way they choose. If you're both in agreement with that method and that works for you, then that's great.
And if that works for you, that's fine. We're not, you
I'm
get
not
that advice
one
to
way
somebody.
or another. Yeah.
You get that advice to some people because they may need it. And it might be a way to settle things for some people, which is whatever works for you.
Yeah, whatever works for your family.
That's right.
You pursue peace. That's the bottom line.
Bottom line.
You got to pursue peace.
All right. One more point we're going to talk about. We have two left.
More.
Is a term called stonewalling. Meaning it's almost like when you're communicating with this person, it's almost like you're talking to a wall. That means this person is...
Keep going. You're doing good. Go ahead. Keep talking.
Okay. It's almost like you don't... this person don't have no response to you, just looking at you and don't respond.
Not even looking at you.
Sometimes not even looking at you. And what it does is it shuts down communication, or because this person either they're not going to respond, they're going to get up and leave the situation without any clarity on when we're going to come back to this, or has it been resolved in your mind? Because if the other person is still talking about it, guess what? It's not resolved.
Right.
Guess what? It's coming back, and it's almost like when you got a demon in your life. If you let it leave, it's going to come back with how many more? 7,
I'm not talking about that.
Okay. But anyway, sometime it comes back, and it comes back worse because you have not taken the time to settle it or agree to come back together to settle it. So it's not a good thing to be a stonewall in your relationship. Knock that wall down. That ain't the kind of boundary you want to build. That ain't it. Because if you build that boundary, you're going to hear about that again. Whether you are a male in the relationship or a female in the relationship, people want to be understood that they are heard and their feelings and thoughts and ideas are heard and validated. Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't be like,
Yeah.
And I can't do. Have I done that?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to get that from her because in the beginning of the relationship, I had this thing about I'm not arguing with you about nothing. You can argue by yourself.
And how did that work for you?
We almost not made it to this point. And
it was just as damaging as me, the approach I was taking, which was criticism, probably all them things you had up there, criticism, contempt, defense, all of that, anger, probably everything on this list except stonewalling. But I was a master at those, and I would say you were a master at stonewalling. And it didn't get us anywhere. It would shut down the communication, and it would prevent us from coming up with a resolution, which is what we both wanted, but we didn't have the skills and the strategies in our kind of tool house or tool belt. We didn't own those strategies to know how to come to a resolution. And so we were doing what we were accustomed to doing, which for me was arguing, expressing everything, just spewing it all out, just attacking you with whatever I had to say. And for him, he was just, oh, well, I'm not going to argue. I'm like, oh, we going to argue. We going to get it out. And he's, I'm not going to argue. Both of those were equally destructive.
Right.
Both of those positions, those postures were equally destructive. So we had to learn some skills about how to communicate, because it wasn't working.
Right. And we're very, very educated people. And when it comes to this, when it comes to this, all the communication you got, she's a communications major in her lifestyle and what she teaches, and not teaches, but her therapy. But it did not help us out.
No.
In this case here, we just needed to get the right tools in order to do what we need to do to make this marriage work.
The thing about it is, and I think with most couples, usually the goal is common. Most of the time, most couples, they have the common goal. They want resolution. You want to resolve whatever the conflict is. Problem is, if you don't have the skills to know how to resolve the conflict, I think Rhonda wrote in the comments a while back that conflict resolution is a must.
It is a must.
So you have to find a way to, or a system that works in your household for you to be able to resolve conflict. And sometimes we do a lesson on conflict resolution. We may need to revisit it.
Right.
But there's some strategies that you can learn for how to come to a resolution for whatever conflict that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it takes some skills.
It does. Marriage
takes skills. It doesn't come, and I don't care how educated you are, that does not mean that you are going to be skilled at marriage.
Right.
It really doesn't have a lot to do with education in general. It has to do with if you have gained those, if you're educated on knowing those skills to help with your individual relationship. And you have to take time to study what works and figure out trial and error. You kind of learn as you go if you learn. Because a lot of people continue to have the same problems over and over again, and they aren't really learning, getting new information to know how to manage their relationship. Because every marriage is going to have some bumps along the way. The key to success is learning how to come up with resolution, and to be able to continually restore your marriage.
Right. And the fifth one we're going to talk about, fifth point, is the one that I think
Most
can
obvious.
lead to a real shutdown, is anger. Anger towards your partner
is a conversation killer, a communication killer.
It does.
And anger is not a sin.
No.
I think sometimes we forget that the Bible tells us to be angry,
but sin not.
And sin not. So the Bible don't tell you don't get angry. It's not a sin for you to be angry. It's about how you handle that anger. And also, I was telling him, I always hear, and I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, that anger is a secondary emotion. So that when you're angry about something, you need to be able to get to the root of it. Why are you angry? What's really the feeling that you're having that leads you to feel anger? The anger is not the true problem there.
Right.
The anger is a response to something else. Are you feeling insecure? Are you feeling overlooked?
Hurt.
Are you hurt?
Are you hurt?
Yeah, emotionally hurt. Are you scared?
Are you feeling fear?
Are you doubtful? Are you losing hope? Why are you angry? And you have to be able to be honest with yourself and to gain that level of emotional intelligence too. That's a buzzword we hear. There's value in it. Figure out what emotion you're actually feeling and why that makes you angry.
It helps, like you just said, it helps to identify the primary feeling that you're initially having. And sometimes anger is a defense mechanism. Because I'm not going to, you're just not going to treat me any kind of way. Because when you say you treat me any kind of way, that's hurt. And now I'm not going to let you hurt me anymore. So I'm finna get angry at you. And, my anger caused me to do other stuff. And sometimes out of your anger, you do things that you regret.
Yeah. Oh, Mandy has she made a comment. She said, is there any advice on if the anger is originating from the grief of a loss? Anger is so a part of that grief process. Anger is going to come forth as a part of the grieving process. Of course, with anger or with grief, it is almost always helpful to get counsel, because grief, that's a complicated process, and navigating through that grief is huge. It's a hard task, and it's hard on grief is hard on marriages too.
Yeah,
very hard on marriages.
Especially when you don't feel like you're going through the same emotional.
That's right.
Stages
at the same
time.
Right.
When we went through the same thing together.
Or you have different expressions of, even if you're at the same stage, if you're both in denial or both in, I don't know all the stages. Anger is one of those stages of grief. It still can be expressed in very different ways. So the best advice I can give you is to make sure that you have a counselor of some sort on your team to help navigate through that, because the anger will come at some point when you're talking about loss, grief and loss, particularly of a child. I mean, because that's a shared experience, and that's one of those things that can bring you closer together or it can push you apart. So working on your marriage during that part is extremely important. But the best advice I can say is to lean on each other and remember that you're both going through this thing together, and to not allow the anger to be directed at one another, because that won't get you where you want to. You could be angry at the fact that it happened, or angry at the world or whatever, but be that together, not directed towards one another. You've got to lean on each other through times like that. And that's even a lot of us are going through grief. It's funny because in church Sunday that came up, and the amount of people that are going through that are grieving right now. It's just, as a world, people are grieving, and that's real. I mean, it's real. We've never seen it more than what we've seen it right now. I don't know in our lifetime that we've ever had people with so much loss all at once.
I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked and start talking about it, but I do have a point to this, and it's just kind of a personal thing. I think for the last 8 weeks, me and you have attended a funeral
of some sort.
Yeah. The last 8
a relative or
close friend,
people we care about that have lost relatives.
Yes.
It's been a lot, and the thing about it is it's not unique to us.
It's not.
Yeah, a lot of people are, and it does. Grief absolutely affects marriages.
And just the anger is real in a lot of those cases because they don't understand the why.
Well, we have to stay focused.
Right.
As far as marriage goes, you have to stay focused and not let the marriage go down at the expense of getting through the process of grieving. Don't let your marriage be another loss as you're going through the process of grieving a loss. You've got to let it bring you closer together. And
like she said, since she used the word process, and that's exactly what it is, there's no timetable on it, but you will get through. Yeah. You will come out the other side of it. Yeah. And you'll be better to somebody else and for somebody else when that happens. Yeah. So, it's all, it's a lesson, I would say. It's a lesson in a process. So learn as you're going through.
And lean on others that have been through, similar losses, or that just people that have gone through the process of grief and had to navigate through marriage during grief. So that's a very important question. I'm glad you asked that question, man, because a lot of people are in that boat right now.
And just a side note, our broadcast is on Thursday. I'm not sure if it's this week. Can somebody tell me
the grief and loss? I think they came on last week.
Was it last week?
So it'll be 2 weeks out. It's every
Foundations this Thursday, and then next week it'll be
it's every 2 weeks. And it should be posted on this same page, this same Facebook page, our Grief and Loss. Was it Life After Grief and Loss? It's the technical name of the ministry. And they come on just like we're coming on they do a Facebook Live, and they talk about getting some skills and some understanding for navigating grief. And I personally have found that page to be very helpful, or those lessons to be very helpful, because I never have spent a lot of time thinking about how to navigate through grief, even though I've had some grief some losses along the way, but it really does help for somebody to say, what strategies can be used.
Right. And we just wanted, since that question was put up for us to talk about, we just took a side note and we
For every fourth Thursday.
Every fourth Thursday. So it's on the page. So with that information, we just want to take a side note and just want to thank y'all for listening to us tonight. We just want to thank y'all for coming on and just giving us 30 minutes of your time on Monday nights. Mm-hmm. And we just appreciate it.
Are we going to be on the week of Thanksgiving?
Yes, we'll be on the week of Thanksgiving.
Well, I guess we'll be on the week of Thanksgiving.
We will be. Yes,
so
ma'am.
We'll see you guys next week and Thanksgiving week as well on Monday.
And if anything changes, we should let you know. But right now, I think we'll be on.
Sounds good.
All right. You done?
Mm-hmm.
All right. From the lady and the coach, we love y'all. Good night.